This studio space is totally outfitted with PTZ cameras, the cameras that can pan, tilt, and zoom. Now, if you've been watching my Amazon live streams, you've probably seen the improved quality of those videos, especially coming from my main front camera. And that's because BZB Gear has sent me over their award-winning 4K AI tracking camera. We're going to talk about it in this video. What's going on, everyone? If you're brand new here, my name is Monty Weaver and I talk a lot about tech products, and specifically we do a lot when it comes to camera gear here on the channel. Now, my friends over at BZB Gear have sent over their award-winning 4K camera, and they're no stranger to this channel because they've also in the past sent over their 1080p NDI camera here that I really love, along with their HDMI video switcher that's here on the desk, which allows you to plug in 4 HDMI inputs and switch between those different inputs. But today we're going to talk about the camera. The camera is magnificent. We're going to walk through the software, talk about the hardware, and the features that I really like on this camera. So let's talk about the back of the camera and the ports that you have. First off being your power on and power off switch. So this does come with the traditional power cable that you can use to power on, and that's how I have it powered on right now, mainly for the setup of the camera. Once it's completely set up, then I'm actually just going to use the NDI functionality and just do power over Ethernet, which brings us to the next port. The next port is our Ethernet connection, and if you wanted to just totally run this over your Ethernet power using a PoE switch, you can totally do that. And that's the way I like to set up my cameras. Now, I'm actually going to work on doing a video of setting up all the PTZ cameras on the network now that I finally have them all in a position that makes sense for me. So using this over your network is the preferred way, but if you just want to use your traditional power, you can definitely do that. The next important ports to talk about are your RS-232 inputs and outputs. This is what's going to allow you to connect your controller, your joystick controller, to the camera and daisy chain it to multiple cameras if you're using the serial connection. However, if you're going to put your camera on the network, you don't need to use your RS-232 ports because you're actually going to be able to do that using that Ethernet port. So less cables if you go the Ethernet PoE connection route. The next port that I want to talk about is the line in port. If you wanted to actually run your audio through your camera, you could do that. You can plug in an audio source microphone using a 3.5mm connection and route your audio through your camera and then back out of your camera to your live streaming destination or your recording source. Now, I don't run my audio through my camera, and I try to make sure I mention that on all of these videos because I do get a lot of questions about how do you connect your microphone to your camera. I don't. I run my audio separate, do an audio interface, an audio mixer, and that way I can control the audio and video separately. It just works better for my workflow. Now, the really cool port on this camera that I have not seen on any other PTZ camera is the SD card slot. You can actually take a micro SD card and put it in the back of this camera and record to that card. Now, I have not seen that on any other PTZ cameras. I guess that's why this is an award-winning PTZ camera, because it has some really great functionality. Now, if you are like me and you like to have backups to make sure you don't lose your data, then not only recording it in your platform of choice for recording or live streaming, but you can also record directly to your SD card. Now, something to keep in mind, if you're going to record to your SD card and you're not connecting audio, keep in mind you're only going to get the video. So if you do want that true backup and you want to make sure you have the audio, you would need to connect a microphone to the 3.5mm. But because I also back up my audio on my audio side, then I could just sync it in post. The next port that I'm actually using right now is the HDMI port. And I'm just using a fiber HDMI connection connected from my camera over to my video switcher. Now, if you're using fiber HDMI, just make sure you have the source end connected to the source end, which is the actual camera. I'm using fiber HDMI throughout this whole setup here, and they have worked really good. I use 50 feet cables and have not had any issues with them. I'll link to everything in the description below if you want to check that out. The next port up is the SDI port. Now, if you don't want to use fiber HDMI for those long cable runs, you can use a SDI cable. SDI cables are reliable, and you have that option on this camera. What I really like about the camera as well is you can use multiple output connections. So there are so many different ways that you can send your video signal, and you can send your video signal multiple different ways simultaneously. That gives you a lot of different options for how you want to actually display what's being seen through this camera lens. The next port that we have up is the USB 2.0 port. This is going to allow you to do those much needed firmware updates, so don't skip out on keeping your systems up to date. And finally, we have the USB 3.0 port, so you can actually connect one cable directly to your computer. So if you don't want to do any of the what might seem as technical stuff, you can just use a USB connection, plug it to your laptop, plug it to your desktop, and bring this camera in as a traditional webcam, and you're good to go. Now, obviously, the camera is already connected for this setup, but let me show you how I got it on the network so that you can see the network connectivity. I have it connected to my computer using an Ethernet cable, one Ethernet cable from the Ethernet port on the camera directly to the Ethernet port on the laptop. So a one-to-one connection. In my laptop settings, I need to go into my network because I have to get my computer on the same network IP address as the camera. So let me bring up my network settings. And the connection that we want to focus on is our Ethernet connection because that's where our cable is plugged into. So if we right click and go to properties, then we'll navigate to our Internet Protocol version 4 and select properties. You can see that I've changed my IP address from obtaining a automatic address to a configured address. The configured address that I'm using is 192.168.5.200. And the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. And the default gateway is 192.168.5.1. So why did I choose this setting? Well, one, it's the recommendation setting from the manual itself. And two, this IP address is open on my network. Three, this IP matches the first 3 octets of the camera's default IP address, which is 192.168.5. The last octet is unique to that specific device, and for the camera, it's .163. So now that I have the IP address configured, I can now open up a browser and connect to the camera. So we'll type in 192.168.5.163, and now we're able to access the web interface of the camera. We'll go into our username, and our default is admin. Select OK. And now we are opening up the software version of this camera, and there are a lot of different features inside. Now, before I get going, I want to let you know that I've already put in an SD card into the back of the camera. The SD card does need to be formatted for FAT32, otherwise it won't work. So make sure you do format it correctly if you want to record to the camera. Let's go through some of the highlights that I like on this software. So number one, everything is on the right-hand side. We're actually under the preview tab. And on the right-hand side, we have the control menu. So we can control our camera in the direction that we'd want it to go simply by clicking on the mouse and being able to go up and down like so. We can also change the speed of the camera as we go from left to right, and we can also change the zoom speed as we go in and out. So we can zoom in and zoom out as needed. Now, if you have a joystick, you obviously can do this on the joystick, or if you want to use the included remote control, you can do this as well. Now, as we scroll down, we can actually set our presets. And this is really what I like, especially doing church and ministry, because we pretty much have a good flow of service and we kind of know how things are going to operate. So let's set a couple presets. So number 0 preset, I want to have as my main shot. So all I have to do is turn on the preset that I want, and then I'll line up the zoom and the pan and the tilting to make sure it aligns properly. And then we'll just click on the little pen icon to set. Now let's go and set preset number 1, and we'll make preset number 1. We'll point it at our PTZ camera in the back. So we'll go ahead and zoom in Okay, now that we have that shot position, we'll go down and select the set button, and we're set. Now we'll just do one more preset, and we'll go over to the other side. And as you can see, it's moving a little bit slower. So if I want to move the camera speed up and adjust it, now as we go to the other side, it's moving faster. And let's go down and check out the Sony gear there. We'll turn on preset 2 and use the pen to lock that in place. Now, all we have to do is call our different presets. So I'll call preset 0, and it comes back to the main shot right on me. We'll call preset 1, and it'll jump over to our BZB Gear camera in the upper corner there. And we can call preset 2, and it will jump over to our camera gear. And as you can see, as we scroll down, we can set a lot more presets. Look at this. You could set over 100 plus presets, 200 plus presets in here, 254 presets you can set. So have fun. If you have multiple camera angles, you definitely can accommodate for all of them. Now at the bottom of the software here, we have the ability to turn on and off our audio. So if you have that microphone connected, you can do so. We have the ability to stream right from here. So if you want to set up your RTMP, you can stream directly from this interface software. We can go into full screen mode, so we can see the camera in its entirety without any of the menu options. And we also have the ability to record. So right now I do have the SD card in, and I can just hit record. And then one thing that you might want to know is when you hit record, here's that other feature. The tally lights come on this camera. So right now I'm looking at the camera and I see the red indication tally lights letting me know that this camera is live and recording. So that's a really good feature to have on, and it helps you know that you are actually recording. Once you're done recording, you can just click on the little record icon and it will turn the recording off. Let's jump into the next menu here, which is track configuration. And we have where we can select the tracking mode. As you can see, we have pretty much the same wheel with pan and tilt in here and zoom functionality, but the feature that I really like is to turn on the tracking mode, and specifically I like the presenter mode. This is going to be really helpful for me when I'm live streaming on Amazon talking about all this different gear, because now the camera can actually follow me. So once I turn on the tracking mode, you can see that the tracking level and the head adjustment does make an adjustment. There is a headroom option here. I wanted to try all of these different options. So first I tried low. So here's the low option, and the low option, as you can see, it's kind of cutting off my head, and I wanted to see why this was, and I think it's because I'm not that far from my camera right now. Now, traditionally, most of you all will not be standing like 5 feet from your camera. It probably will be a little bit further away. So as I back up further from my camera, you can see that it does come in nice and tight, and it does still have the low headroom, but now it's not cutting me off. And at this point, I'm closer to about 8 feet away from the camera. So this was probably where you want to have your talent sit, or if you're doing any type of sit down interviews, making sure that your camera is at a better distance away. I like this look a little bit better because I don't want to cut off the head, and I don't like too much headroom between the talent and where the ceiling or where just that extra white space would be. Now, if I go and change it back to medium, that's what you guys saw at the beginning of the video. So it's a little bit more space than I would like, but it makes sure that your talent's head is not cut off. So as you can see, this camera does do a really good job of tracking me, and I want to change it over to high so that you can see that as well. But you do have the options to set how you want this to track, and depending on the environment that you're in, you might like low, you might like medium, or you might like high, but definitely track it. But definitely change it up as you see fit. So let's jump back into medium here. And I'm going to actually walk a little bit further from this space. So we are in a retrofitted, outfitted basement here. And I'm going to walk behind this light here, and you can see that the camera is definitely tracking me. And even when I go behind obstacles, it still looks for me. It still knows how to track me. So I really like the fact that this thing works like an AI tracking camera works, supposed to work. I don't have to worry about a camera operator. As long as I don't run out of the screen, then I'm pretty good here. And this is really, really helpful for me when I'm live streaming, especially doing it by myself. Let's jump over to the next tab here, which is the configuration tab. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are a lot of different settings here. If you're gonna look into getting this camera, I highly encourage you to go through these different settings. One of the settings that I really like is the video out setting. Now, right now, we are currently configured for 1080p 60 frames a second. And the reason being is because I'm running this camera through my video switcher, and my video switcher is maxed out at 1080p. However, this is a 4K camera, so you have the ability to send out your video in 4K. So if you wanted to select that option, make sure that your video capture card or your video switcher can process the 4K in order to do so. Another section that you definitely want to check out when setting up your camera is to make sure that you check the IP address. As I mentioned, the default IP address is 192.168.5.163, but for my internal network here in the studio, I will need to change my IP address so that it can communicate with my controller. So that'll be done not in this video, but definitely make sure that you do that when you're setting this up in your environment. Another tab to take a look at is the NDI section. By default, NDI is already enabled, and that's what I really like about this camera. We're going to actually use the NDI feature now to bring this into OBS. Inside of OBS, I'm going to create a brand new scene, and I'm going to call this BZB for our BZB Gear camera. And for our sources, I'm going to add an NDI source. And the NDI source that I'm going to add will be the camera itself, which is called NDI_HX. Select OK. And the camera is now showing in OBS for me. And what is really cool about this as well is this tally light system. It automatically turned green. Now, currently, we only have our preview open, so this is really nice. Now, I'm going to open back up my tracking, re-enable tracking, and show you what this looks like. So let's say that we have an on-air talent here, and we don't want to go live yet. This allows us to see and make sure that everything is working in our preview mode. Our camera is green, so we know that's in preview mode, and we can see in OBS that we're in preview mode. But once I hit the transition button in OBS, our camera now turns red and lets us know that we are live. So it lets your talent know that they're live, and you can visually see it as the media person seeing that you're live. I really like this functionality of the camera and how easy it is to use the tally lights because you don't have to configure anything else. One of the things I also tested was using this in Wirecast, which is another live streaming platform that I use, and it works the same way. There was no extra configurations needed. The tally lights automatically were green for preview and automatically turned red for program mode. Really like that feature. So when it comes to actually using this camera, I am really loving it. The fact that this camera is 4K just sets it apart from any other camera that I currently have right now in the studio. The quality of the image is just so much better. And obviously you're going to get that with a 4K camera because the sensor is better, especially in low light situations. Now, I also really like the fact that this has tally lights. So if I have 2 of these cameras or 3 or 4, I can easily see which camera is live. So that way the talent knows which camera to actually make eye contact with. And I really like the fact that there's an SD card slot on the back. That way I can back up my recordings directly to the SD card and just pop that out and have it with me when I need it. So there are so many different features on this camera. If you haven't already checked out the BZB Gear line, I'm going to link to their YouTube channel as well because they put out a lot of great tutorial videos, especially if you're trying to do your initial setups or you're trying to see those different range tests like I do. How far is 25 feet versus 12 feet? Which camera do you need for that specific distance? They have some really great tutorial videos. If this video has been helpful for you, look forward to seeing you in the next one.